What up, guys? This is Seraph here for part 3 of A Dangerous Method, and in this video I'm going to be covering some information about gear choice and go over some tactics for keeping up your stack in practice if you're, say, running a zone. I'm over here in Sanctuary. We're going to spend some time on the dummy, and I'll shadow box for the notions of tactics when you're running a zone. Now, there's something called inherent critical bonus, okay? And if you have certain skills up, they're going to be adding critical hit damage to your 0. And at a certain point, gun damage is actually going to overshadow crit damage as what's going to be the value you want to prioritize. So, at no stat counts with this killer calm on, you can see that the Hawkeye is doing 1016 and the Trespasser is doing 683. Okay, so the Hawkeye is winning out at first. Now I have the killer calm up. It's giving me 45% critical hit damage, but let's go ahead and farm up some crits and see what the numbers are and how they behave when you. Alright, let's see what the numbers are going to behave once you have, say, 30 stacks. So I'm at 2138 with the Hawkeye now. And let's let it get back down to 30. $23.92. So I'm doing more damage with the Trespasser, okay, and much more damage with the Skullmasher. And now the Hawkeye has 480% critical hit damage. You're like, whoa, that's 5 times the damage. Why? Well, it's because those guns already have some multipliers in there, and the way that the math works out in the game, it gets to a point, especially with 0, where you have such a large inherent critical bonus that you got to look at it like the critical hit damage is a modifier of the base value of gun damage. And if your gun damage is a bigger block, and that's a modifier to it, then the bigger the gun damage, the more modification is going on. Alright? Now, what does that mean in terms of play? Alright? Well, the idea here with a dangerous method, if you're going to start running CA stacks, is you're going to be using your crit machine to farm criticals off of an enemy, getting a certain stat count, and that number's gonna change. We talked about in the last video the psychology of critical ascension and how those stacks are gonna represent comms and skills, and your stat count is gonna change depending on what you're spec'd into or what you're not spec'd into. So the ideal stat count is gonna be different for different builds. There's going to be a threshold where everything's going to die in one shot if you have the right gun equipped. Okay? Now, keeping up that stat count doesn't seem like it's very straightforward, but if you're using 4 snipers and, you know, we covered ammo, the way that the game generates ammo for the player. If you're checking your boxes and whatnot, you don't have to go into a vendor to buy ammo. And basically what happens is you have the ability to get a stat count approaching what your ideal is, get into the zone, start popping crits, okay, and then from there you're going to reach a point where there's 1 or 2 enemies left, and killing and destroying the source of a critical hit when you have critical ascension as a component of your playstyle and your build isn't the best idea. Okay, not unless you can guarantee you're going to make it from A to B without losing more than 20% of your stacks. Because you can't keep feeding into critical ascension because the game won't spawn enough ammo to keep up with the fact that you have to keep feeding into it. But let's say back to that shadow calm I talked to in the last video. Let's say I get a stat count up. I pop all the heads in the zone except for 1, and then I will get my stat count back up to moderate. Rather than turning over to my kill weapon, I'll move away from that enemy and get a couple more hits, okay? to stop my depletion, and then I'll get towards that zone, turn around with my killer, and go ahead and finish him off. Then I get, if I'm expecting a follow through, a movement speed boost, I make it to the next enemy camp and start popping domes, and I never lose my stat count, alright? But the key to that is having a gun that's not going to destroy the source of a critical hit, no matter what your stat count is. And a level 50 gun is, once you get enough stacks, it's going to be destroying the source of a critical hit. That's why we farmed up the crit machine in that first video. If you start prioritizing the maintenance of critical hits over the killing of enemies, then you're going to realize that the best offense is, or the best defense is a good offense. If you're scoring criticals, it tends to stagger enemies, even if you're not doing that much damage. I don't know what the numbers are for that, but if you're getting crits off of a single enemy consistently, he's not going to be dealing you as much damage as if you weren't shooting him in the head. And like for a loader, you pop their 2 arms off, they don't have their guns, and then it's just the eye blast, which you can learn to dodge with a strafe. If you have the transformer, that's dropped by obviously loot midgets in the game, but I believe it's Timon that drops it. You're immune to electrical damage, and when you have that electrical damage immunity, you're not going to be taken, it's not going to hurt you as bad to get hit by that eye blast anyway. So you can use his eye that's remaining as the source of a critical hit, or shoot him in the crotch and farm up plenty of critical hits. So whatever your stat count is going to be dependent upon what your comms are. If you've got a comm up that doesn't boost your gun damage and your crit hit damage like the sniper comm does, you're going to need to have a higher stat count. But if I don't have a stockpile relic up, I don't have as much ammo to play with, so you have to be better with maintaining your stacks and dealing with it while running a zone if you don't have that extra buffer. If you're just learning how to use critical ascension as a sniper, then I strongly recommend you pick up a stockpile relic, either on the trade forums or farm one up for yourself. It's going to make life a lot easier because you don't have to maintain your stat count as effectively. You can afford to lose half of your stacks, because you get caught up doing whatever between zones. Just make sure to keep replenishing your ammo based on the way that the game gives you ammo back, and you should be fine. Now, if I move away from my stockpile relic, I can start making some decisions about survivability or higher damage if I'm using elemental multipliers, and then obviously having fight for your lifetime. Now, Zero doesn't have any fight for your life skills, but that doesn't mean if you have at 1 with the gun, alright, then you're gonna have you shouldn't have much problem popping ahead even at distance because of at 1 with the gun. So that's even further argument for having it, even if you don't tend to hip fire. But having that fight for your lifetime, I've always ran a tenacity relic before the UVHM update, and then they added sniper rifle damage to it, and it was kind of a no-brainer. I tend to run that much more than I run the stockpile relic. I'm getting the equivalent of what, 6 stacks out of it anyway, and then you add the sniper comm onto it, and that's another 8 stacks, and I don't have to have nearly as high of a stat count between zones. In fact, I can very easily lose my entire stat count and build it back up with a crit machine to where I'm still doing the sort of numbers I need to take down mobs at a reasonable time frame. And it's not so much time frame, but it's actually bullets spent. Okay, so your rate of it's dependent upon how fast you're using up your ammo. Guns like the Lyuda and the Pitchfork, they burn a lot of ammo. Okay, so once you get your criticals, okay, with your crit machine, you can't afford to be wasting ammo on things. Alright, so how many bullets does it take me to kill this enemy with X stat count and X gear loadout? In my critical ascension isn't a game changer thread, I said, you need to be concerned with 3 things: proximity to target, and the damage of your ordnance against said target. And you know, that very much ties into what your stat count is, what your damage numbers are, what that enemy is, his weaknesses, his resistances. So keep those things in mind when you're making selections on gear. And if you have any specific questions or whatever, like always, just leave some comments in the video section here, or post in the thread, and I'll try to cover them in the next installment in this sniper guide. I do plan to go ahead and run a zone as a pure CA buff sniper. Try to get a muck-a-muck or something to illustrate the concept pretty clearly with just 2 guns. And you can see for yourselves how ammo really isn't an issue, and maintaining your stat count is totally viable. Alright? This has been Sarah for part 3, and hope you enjoyed the video and got some of the information you're looking for. Happy hunting.